I remember the exact instant the feeling of disgust took hold of me. Not anger, not sadness. Those came later. It was disgust, raw and visceral. It felt like biting down on a piece of fruit only to taste rot. My mind froze, my palms went damp, and I stared at nothing for a few heartbeats. I should have pressed the mute button on the TV, but for some reason I didn't. I just let the low murmur of some late-night crime show fill the silence, because I couldn't stand to hear her soft laughter drifting in from the next room. It was strange how quiet I'd become in my own home. I found myself breathing gently, afraid of making a sound, as if I were an intruder. My wife was somewhere down the hall, talking in hushed tones on her cell phone, her voice carrying a sweetness I no longer recognized. That was the night I realized something. No, everything about our life was wrong. I used to love the soft resonance of her voice. She'd call me Tom, in that playful, drawn-out way, especially when we were younger. Tom. Like she was teasing me, inviting me into her world. Now, as I watched the flickering images on the screen, I realized she never said my name like that anymore. Her laughter, once so comforting, had grown forced around me. Yet tonight, on that phone call, I could hear genuine warmth in her tone, a warmth she'd stopped showing me long ago. I tried turning up the volume, but all it did was highlight the artificial drama of the show. So I shut it off, hoping for some measure of peace, and ended up with a dreadful silence that made her laughter resonate louder than ever. That was when my stomach lurched with disgust. I didn't know yet what was going on, but some primal part of me recognized betrayal in that sound. A few days later, everything clicked. I discovered the hidden perfume bottle behind the toilet tank. Mandarin, and some cheap edge of bitterness, the scent still fresh. It didn't smell like anything I would wear, and I sure as hell knew it didn't belong to her. My wife had always favored floral notes, subtle, feminine. This was a man's scent, bold and tangy, like a challenge. A brand I'd noticed before. The same brand some runner at the marathon in Sacramento used. I was one of the sponsors that day, smiling for the cameras, handing out checks, believing my wife was proud of me. The moment I recognized that smell, I felt the disgust surge again. It spread through me like poison, but I kept quiet. Maybe I was terrified that if I spoke, if I yelled, I would never stop. Instead, I pressed my teeth together until my jaw ached and stared at the little bottle, listening to the faint drip of the faucet. I met her, Melissa, 20 years ago, give or take. We were just kids back then, in college, both wide-eyed about the future. She had a creative spark, an artistic soul she used to talk about endlessly, spinning dreams of designing entire brand campaigns, painting murals, traveling the country. I was more pragmatic. I majored in business administration, thinking I'd build up enough capital to let her thrive creatively. We had a plan. I'd handle the finances. She'd bring the artistry. Together, we'd build a life. And for a while, it worked. We moved to Sacramento after I got a steady contract as a marketing consultant. She continued freelance graphic design from home. We had good years. The first time I saw her pregnant belly, the first time we talked about how we'd decorate the nursery, I remember tears in my eyes. Not from fear, but from pure joy. She was so happy, radiant, like everything we'd dreamed of was finally happening. But happiness can turn to routine, and routine can become stagnation. We both grew complacent. I was working more and more. She turned her focus elsewhere. At first, on her design projects. Then, without me noticing, she turned her focus to someone else entirely. I discovered the full truth only after the DNA test for our son. We'd done it for medical reasons, or so I thought. Some vague genealogical check. But the results arrived one morning. A crisp envelope I opened with curiosity that froze into horror. The numbers were there, undeniable. That child, the boy I'd raised, loved, taught to tie his shoes and ride a bike, was not genetically mine. That was the day my blood turned cold. Not from anger. It was like my blood just dissolved into an empty numbness, a vacuum. I didn't kick down doors or hurl accusations. Instead, I slipped deeper into a silent storm. I think she knew I'd found out, because she started avoiding my gaze. She'd busy herself in the kitchen, or lock the door when she took a shower. Perhaps she feared confrontation. But there was no confrontation, not then. I just let the silence fester. For a man in his 40s who believed in building a stable life, discovering that your wife's child is not yours is like watching the ground crack open at your feet. Every memory snaps into question. Every, "I love you," we exchanged stings like a lie. I tried to sleep it away, bury myself in work, sponsor more events, as though the next contract or charity run might bandage the gaping wound. But the bitterness remained. One night, about a week after I read those test results, I came home early. Usually, I'd linger at the office or at a bar, sipping something strong, dreading the walk through our front door. But that evening, I don't know, some masochistic part of me wanted the truth hammered in. I found the house quiet. Not the comfortable hush of a shared home, but the sort of emptiness you feel in an abandoned place. I heard faint sounds from upstairs, hushed laughter, low voices. My mind told me, you should stop. But my feet moved on their own, treading carefully on the carpeted steps. The door to our bedroom was ajar. Light spilled onto the hallway in a thin beam. My heart hammered, echoing in my ears, but I made no sound. I approached the door, saw her figure in the reflection of the floor-length mirror. She was partially unclothed, her hair tumbling freely over her shoulders, the silhouette of her bare arms pulling someone closer. He was taller than her, lean, with a runner's physique. I saw his muscled back flex as he leaned into her, burying his face in her neck. The low moan she made, a sound of pleasure I hadn't heard from her in years, broke something inside me. I should have left. I should have thrown the door wide open and demanded answers. Yet I froze, my lungs refusing to breathe. I watched them for maybe 3 seconds, maybe an eternity. Her hand slid along his shoulders, nails lightly scratching his skin. He lifted his face to kiss her, an intense, breathless kiss, as though they couldn't get enough of each other. The erotic charge in that room was suffocating to me. I experienced a cascade of emotions in that moment. Disbelief, jealousy, heartbreak, disgust. But also something else, an odd sense of detachment, like I was outside my body, observing. I found myself studying the angle of his arms, the twist of her torso, the parted lips. A shocking thought flashed. So this is what real passion looks like for her now. Without a word, I turned and descended the stairs, each step measured, my pulse throbbing in my ears. I felt a sweat break across my brow. The back of my neck burned. I went straight to the liquor cabinet and poured myself 2 fingers of whiskey. The first sip went down like fire, scalding my throat, but I forced it down. They never heard me. When the front door slammed behind me, that was probably their first clue. It occurred to me, in a dull, distant way, that this might be the moment a husband storms back upstairs, dragging the intruder out by the throat. But I didn't. I just started the car and drove away, numb to the world. In the days that followed, I waited for her to say something, to confess or to apologize. She did neither. She tiptoed around me, maybe hoping I hadn't seen. Maybe in her mind, if I didn't confront her, she could pretend everything was normal. I gave her no such comfort, but I also gave her no direct accusations. I recall one particularly stark morning. I was sitting at the kitchen table, swirling black coffee in my mug, staring at the swirling pattern, lost in my thoughts. She came in, wearing a robe, her hair damp from a shower. "Morning," she said quietly. I said nothing. I just nodded, as if the act of speaking was too big a chore. She cleared her throat. You got home earlier than usual last night." My heart pounded. For a split second, I was sure she'd mentioned the runner, mentioned the scene I'd witnessed. But she stayed silent, just fiddling with the tie of her robe. I watched her. She looked restless, uneasy, biting her lower lip. There was a time, long ago, when I would have touched her cheek and asked, "Hey, what's wrong?" That time felt like another lifetime. She finally asked, "Tom, are you okay?" "Never been better," I replied, with a smile so cold my lips felt stiff. It was that moment I realized I was done with tears, done with outbursts. I was beyond heartbreak and into something else. A place where you can calmly orchestrate the destruction of the life you once believed in. A turning point came when our son, well, the child I thought was my son, ran up to me, excited about some father-son day at his school. He wanted me to come, to show off what I do. "You can talk to them about marketing and those marathons you helped at," he said, his eyes shining. "Maybe you can show them pictures, let them know how you sponsor the runners and stuff." A part of me wanted to say, yes, of course, to cling to that paternal role. Another part, a darker corner of my soul, wanted to shout, "I am not your father." I did neither. I smiled, ruffled his hair, and said, "We'll see," then walked away. In the bathroom, I stared at my reflection. I looked older, more drained. The lines around my eyes had deepened. Something about that reflection ignited a spark of hatred. Not just for the man upstairs, not just for my wife, but for myself. For letting it come to this. The next day, I confronted the real father. I found him at the local track in Sacramento, the one near the sports complex I'd sponsored. It was easy enough to track him down through mutual acquaintances in the running community. The arrogance in the air, the scent of that cheap cologne on his skin, confirmed everything. I tried to keep my voice steady. "You've been seeing my wife," I said, stepping onto the track while he was cooling down. He swallowed, glancing around as if checking if someone else might intervene. We didn't mean." "Don't," I said. "Don't feed me excuses. I know." He opened his mouth, and for a split second, he seemed on the verge of an apology or some cliché about how it just happened. Then he shrugged. "Look, it's complicated. Complicated. That's one word for it." My knuckles tightened, but I made no move toward him. Instead, I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out the DNA test results, and shoved the papers against his chest. He grabbed them out of reflex, glancing over the lines of text. I saw his eyes widen, but he pressed his lips together, not denying a thing. I expected an explosion of anger from my side, or perhaps from his, but all I felt was that same cold emptiness. "You can have them both," I said, my voice almost calm. "She and that child you fathered. I'm done." And with that, I turned and walked away, the echo of my footsteps and the rapid pounding of my heart filling my ears. The idea for my revenge came from a place I can barely explain. Maybe it was the part of me that wanted control, a theatrical flair to show the world, especially her, that I wasn't some clueless fool. Or maybe it was a twisted need to humiliate, to drag out into the light what had so far been hidden in shadows. I decided to write a play. I called it 4 Miles to the Finish, drawing from the marathons we'd sponsored. The irony appealed to me. 4 miles to the finish line. 4 players in this fiasco if you counted the child. But mostly, I knew it would sting her. She used to say she admired my creative side, that I was so good at weaving narratives, at writing marketing scripts. Well, this would be the final script. I rented a small theater under the guise of a local fundraiser event. After all, I had connections. People lined up for philanthropic projects. A mysterious new play promised to raise money for some cause or other. I invited her. I told her it was a charity piece I was producing, that I wanted her there for moral support. She seemed surprised by the invitation, uncertain. But curiosity got the better of her, and she agreed to come. On opening night, a modest audience filled the seats, among them acquaintances, some sponsors, a few local critics, and my wife. I peeked from behind the curtain, scanning the crowd until I spotted her. She looked anxious, biting her lip, fidgeting with the program. The overhead lights gave her hair a bronzed glow. My stomach churned. A voice in the back of my head asked, "Are you sure about this?" I ignored it. I took my position on stage, reminding myself of each line, each punishing detail I'd woven into this narrative. The spotlight burned hot. My first lines were quiet, delivered in a low, trembling tone, like a confession. I played a devoted husband, oblivious to the betrayal brewing in his home. The script was subtle at first, innocent dialogues with a supportive spouse, mention of a child on the way. The early scenes drew mild laughter. The storyline seemed ordinary, comedic even, like a slice of domestic life. But the pace changed abruptly in Act II. The comedic dialogue shifted to tension-laced lines. In the scene set in the bathroom. Yes, I replicated it exactly as I had found that perfume bottle behind the toilet tank. The audience watched as the husband discovered a hidden stash, a cologne that did not belong to him, with a brand name referencing a marathon. I built the tension carefully, letting the crowd sense the avalanche of betrayal. When the big reveal came, that the child was not his, the audience let out a collective gasp. Some murmured in surprise. I glanced toward where Melissa sat. I could see her posture stiffen, her face pale. She gripped the program so tight the paper crumpled in her hands. As the scene veered into the confrontation, the lines I'd written became eerily personal. I heard scattered laughter from those who thought it was just comedic exaggeration. The way I delivered certain lines, though, dripped with venom. I wasn't just an actor delivering a script. I was bearing my soul, lashing out with the words I'd wanted to say to her for weeks. But it got worse. The final blow of Act II was the husband learning that he was the unwitting sponsor of his wife's lover. The house erupted in laughter, but it was that uneasy kind of laughter. The audience wasn't sure if they were supposed to find it funny. Some snickered nervously, others fell silent. During intermission, I slipped off stage and peered around the curtain. I saw her in the lobby, clinging to a pillar, tears in her eyes. A friend approached her, evidently concerned, but she brushed them off and stayed. She hadn't fled. Part of me admired that resilience, or maybe it was shock. Act II was the direct reflection of what had happened inside me. The husband, hollowed out by betrayal, put on a mask of composure. He orchestrated a public spectacle of his pain. I'd inserted lines about hosting a party, inviting the entire community, only to reveal the affair in front of everyone. The script was unrelenting. Each word hammered home the point. The wife's tears, the lover's cowardice, the child's innocence. Near the climax, I looked directly at her seat. Her eyes met mine. I didn't see the defiance or anger I expected. I saw sorrow. Regret, maybe. But not enough to quell my fury. Finally, the moment arrived. I confronted the actress playing my wife's role on stage, reciting words that I'd fantasized saying to the real Melissa. You took our life, our love, our child, and built a lie so fragile it shattered at a single touch. I will never trust you again, and I will never love you the same. Do you understand? The actress on stage sobbed convincingly. Some audience members laughed out of discomfort, unsure if it was comedic or tragic. The line between drama and real life blurred for me. My voice cracked, but I pushed through. In the script, the wife begs for forgiveness. The husband offers none. Then the stage lights dim. In that darkness, I was meant to exit quietly, a symbolic withdrawal. But I improvised that night. I stepped forward, letting the dim glow catch my face, and I added one unscripted line. I still love you, but now, I love you without a heart. A hush fell over the theater. That hush was the purest, rawest expression of what I felt. The spotlight cut. End of Act II. The audience was left to stew in silence before the final act. The final act was short. The husband stands alone, delivering a monologue about how emptiness can be a foundation. He was going to rebuild his world, without her. The script ended on a line. I am colder than vengeance, and stronger than your lies. Curtain. I delivered it with every ounce of bitterness in my soul. The stage lights went black. I heard scattered applause, confused at first, then thunderous. People rose to their feet, some cheering, others wiping their eyes. I looked out one last time. My gaze found Melissa, tears streaming down her cheeks, her hands shaking. She looked as if she might call my name, but I turned away. I exited, my footsteps echoing in the wings. I could feel sweat rolling down my back. My hands trembled. A strange calm settled over me, like a soldier returning from a battle, unsure if he'd won or lost. But I knew I'd done what I set out to do, show her, and the world, exactly how she'd broken me. After the play, I avoided the crowd. I slipped out a side exit, inhaling the chilly Sacramento night air. The hush of the alley welcomed me, far from the theater's bright lights. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at the screen, a text from her. "Please, we need to talk." I exhaled shakily, staring at the illuminated message. Part of me wanted to throw my phone against the wall. Part of me wanted to respond with 1,000 accusations, but a deeper voice inside me whispered, no. For months, I'd carried the weight of her betrayal. For weeks, I'd planned this moment, poured every ounce of my heartbreak into that performance. Now, at the pinnacle, I felt no triumph. My chest was an empty space. I typed back a simple reply, "Not now." Then I turned off my phone. If you told me years ago I would do something so calculated, so cruel, I would have laughed. I was the dependable one, the one who believed in building a family, a future. Now I was just a man who'd lost his illusions. I spent that night in a motel room by the highway. The neon sign buzzed outside my window, painting the walls red and blue. I sat on the edge of the bed, the echo of the play's final lines running on repeat in my head. I still love you, but now I love you without a heart. Was it true? Did I still love her? I wasn't sure. Maybe the real me was buried under layers of hurt. Maybe the love was like a ghost that refused to rest. But I did know that I had nothing left to give her. We were both stripped bare, her tears and my fury laid out for an audience to see. I tried to sleep, but images of that bathroom scene wouldn't let me rest. The memory of her moan, the sight of her pressed against his body, devouring him with that passion she once reserved for me, drilled into my brain. I clenched my fists, feeling the nails bite into my palms. At some point, I drifted off. When I woke, watery daylight seeped through the curtains. My eyes burned with exhaustion. But I got up, showered under lukewarm water, and headed out into the cold morning air. I drove home, half expecting the locks to be changed, or her car to be gone. Instead, the house looked the same, tranquil, suburban, mocking me. Inside, it was quiet. She was in the living room, perched on the edge of the couch. When I stepped in, she stood, her eyes red, face blotchy from crying. We stared at each other. The tension was suffocating. She parted her lips, seemed about to speak, then closed her mouth. I let the silence linger. I wanted her to feel it, the weight of everything unsaid. Finally, she stammered, "Tom, look, I don't even know where to start." I dropped my keys on the table, the clatter echoing. "Start with how long," I said, my voice flat. Her lip trembled. 8 months. It just happened. That worthless phrase again. It just happened. As if it were a mild accident, some unstoppable force. 8 months, I repeated, stepping into the living room, arms crossed. That child, he's not. Her shoulders caved. It's his. I'm sorry. I let her see my rage, simmering beneath the calm facade. My next words came out measured. Why didn't you tell me? Why pretend? Her eyes darted, searching the room, as if the walls might provide her an escape. I was afraid. We were drifting apart. I convinced myself you wouldn't, that you'd never find out. I didn't want to lose everything. You lost it the moment you climbed into bed with him. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Then tears welled up again, and she wiped them away furiously. I know. I'm sorry. Please, Tom, you have every right to hate me. But that child, he loves you. You've been his father in every way that matters. A spark of pain hit me. She was right about one thing. I'd spent years raising him, cheering him on, teaching him to read, to swim, to ride a bike. Could I just shut off fatherhood like a switch? I sank into the nearest chair, burying my face in my hands. You destroyed my faith, I murmured, my voice muffled. Did you ever love me at all? She moved closer, hesitating. Yes, I always have. I messed up. Messed up, I echoed, bitterness lacing my tone. You didn't just slip once. You had a full-blown relationship, a child, a secret for 8 years. That's not messing up. That's living a lie. She broke down then, sobbing into her hands, shoulders heaving. I watched her, feeling only a distant pang in my chest. Once, her tears would have shattered me, driven me to comfort her. But that man was gone now. Without another word, I stood and walked out the door, leaving her weeping on the couch. Days passed in a fog. I locked myself in my home office, ignoring calls from everyone. Friends, colleagues, even potential clients. My phone beeped occasionally with text from the runner. I never responded. Let him squirm. One day, the child knocked gently on my office door. Dad. I froze. The word Dad hit me like a hammer. That's who I'd been to him, day in, day out. Blood or no blood? Yeah, I managed to say, clearing my throat. He poked his head in, looking worried. Mom's crying a lot. Are you and her fighting? I swallowed. How could I even begin to explain? We're having a grown-up problem. I said, it's not your fault. He looked down, scuffing his sneaker on the carpet. I hate it when she cries, he whispered. I stood, crossing the room. My hand hesitated, then ruffled his hair. He looked up at me with those big eyes. Part of me wanted to say, you're not mine, to push him away, to protect what was left of my heart. Another part, the father in me, wanted to pull him close and assure him I wasn't going anywhere. I did neither. I simply said, go check on your mom, okay? Tell her I'll be downstairs soon. He nodded, retreating. Once the door clicked shut, I slumped into my chair, guilt knifing through my gut. The tension at home suffocated me, so I made an excuse to leave, telling Melissa I needed to finalize some business deals. In truth, I just drove aimlessly, the city lights blurring past my windows. Eventually, I parked by the river, the water reflecting neon glimmers from a nearby bar sign. I sat on a bench, staring at my own reflection in the current, wondering if I even recognized myself. I thought of the play I'd put on, the savage satisfaction I'd felt watching her crumble. Was I proud of that, or did it make me a monster? In that swirling tide of self-doubt, I realized something. I had effectively destroyed any chance of reconciliation. There was no going back. And maybe that was the point. Eventually, I found the ring. I had taken off my wedding band weeks ago, stuffed it into my glove compartment. Now, under the pale glow of the moon, I rolled it between my fingers, remembering the day I slid it onto her hand and promised fidelity. A promise she shattered. A promise I'd tried so hard to keep. Maybe I'm still that man, I thought. Or maybe the man I used to be died the moment I smelled that cologne behind the toilet. Time moved strangely after that. I made up my mind to leave, but something rooted me to the house. Was it loyalty to a child that still called me Dad? Guilt over my vows, my sense of responsibility? Or was it some small, wretched love for the woman who betrayed me? I couldn't decide, so I floated in that dead space. Melissa tiptoed around me, apologizing in small ways, making me coffee, offering me dinner. We avoided real conversations, as if each day might magically fix the mess we were in. A part of me recognized I was punishing her by making her live in the tension, never letting her off the hook. Then came the phone call that changed everything. The local marathon organizers wanted me to sponsor the next big event in Sacramento. They even suggested a special ceremony, acknowledging my years of support. The irony was painful. I'd be presenting awards to runners like him. I almost turned them down. But then I pictured the final scene of the play I'd performed. The last lines about being colder than vengeance. If I truly was that man now, I would show up. I would stand next to them, next to him, unflinching. I wouldn't hide from the life that had betrayed me. I accepted. The event arrived on a sunny Saturday. Hundreds of participants milled about, warming up, stretching. My job was to say a few words at the start, then help present medals at the end. Cameras flashed as I gave a brief speech about community, perseverance, and the spirit of running. It sounded hollow to my own ears, but the crowd clapped politely. Melissa and our son stood in the audience, presumably to support me, though I suspected Melissa wanted to keep an eye on the runner. He was there, of course, wearing his usual brand of cologne. I caught a whiff of that Mandarin bitterness in the air as he jogged by. He glanced at me, some fleeting mixture of guilt and defiance in his gaze. The race began, and I watched from the sidelines, handing out water cups to volunteers, shaking hands with sponsors. My mind drifted. I thought about how much energy I'd invested in a marriage built on illusions, how I was the one pumping resources into the man who'd fathered my wife's child. About an hour later, the front runners started coming in. I positioned myself by the finish line, microphone in hand, smiling stiffly for the cameras. One after another, the runners crossed, sweat-soaked, triumphant. I called out times, praised their efforts. Then he appeared, sprinting the last stretch, face contorted with effort. He wasn't in first place, not even close. Still, he pressed on, crossing the line. I forced a polite smile as he staggered, panting. The cameras caught me placing a finisher's medal around his neck. A symbolic gesture. Our eyes locked. He muttered, "Thanks," or something like that. Breathless. I nodded, stepping back. In that moment, I felt an odd sense of release. This is the man who undid my marriage. The man who fathered the child I raised. And here I am, awarding him. Cold is also an emotion, I reminded myself. We returned home separately, me driving my car, Melissa and the child in hers. She invited me to dinner, said we could have a quiet meal as a family. Family. The word tasted bitter. But I agreed. Maybe I wanted closure, or maybe I was simply too exhausted to fight. She cooked pasta. The child chattered about the race, about seeing all the runners cross the finish line. I answered in monosyllables, my mind on the night I'd staged that dramatic betrayal on the theater stage. We ate with forced normalcy, as if this were any other night. Then Melissa cleared her throat. "Tom," she said softly, we can't keep living in this limbo." I lowered my fork. "I agree." She inhaled. "I know I hurt you. I can't undo that. But, do you think we could try therapy? For his sake?" She glanced at the boy in the living room, watching cartoons. My gut churned. Therapy. Was there a counselor alive who could fix a betrayal of this magnitude? I looked at her, noticing the desperation in her eyes. Despite everything, despite the rage, I felt a flicker of pity. She was, in her own flawed way, grasping for salvation. I leaned back, drumming my fingers on the table. He needs a stable environment. But we both know that environment is gone. She nodded, tears brimming. "I'm willing to try anything." I swallowed hard. Part of me wanted to lash out. "You should have tried not sleeping with him." But the weariness was stronger than anger now. "I'll think about it," I said, standing. She reached for my hand. "Tom, please." I pulled away gently. "I can't give you answers right now." That night, I slept on the couch, if you can call it sleep. I drifted in and out, haunted by images of the stage, the bathroom, the test results. My dreams blurred together, me handing trophies to the runner, him wearing my ring, Melissa cradling a child that had my face. It was madness. Sometime around 3 a.m, I sat up, heart hammering. I needed air. I slipped out the front door, barefoot, pajamas rumpled, stepping onto the dew-covered lawn. The neighborhood was dead quiet. A lonely street lamp flickered at the corner. I looked up at the stars, blinking away tears I hadn't realized were there. My entire body felt tight, clenched with sorrow or rage or emptiness. Maybe all three. How did it come to this? I whispered to no one. The next day, I found a note in my office. It was from the child, scrawled in his childish handwriting. "Dad, please don't leave. I love you. I'll be good. I promise." My chest constricted, tears stinging my eyes. I stared at those words for a long time, the page trembling in my grip. He was innocent in all this. None of it was his fault. I'd been his father figure. Did I have the right to abandon him now, even if I was reeling from his mother's betrayal? I folded the note carefully and tucked it into my desk drawer. My mind reeled with conflicting emotions. The urge to run, the responsibility to stay. Eventually, I realized I couldn't keep drifting in that no-man's land. I needed closure, one final confrontation to release me from the loop of anger and heartbreak. So I called her. "Can you meet me at the theater?" I said. She hesitated on the other end of the line. "Why the theater?" "Just meet me there." We met on the empty stage where I'd given my performance. The seats were dark, rows upon rows of shadows. The overhead lights were off, so only the dull glow of the exit signs gave us any illumination. She stood at center stage, arms folded protectively over her chest, as if expecting another ambush. I climbed the few steps from the wing, my footsteps echoing in the hush. "I want you to see this place," I said quietly, where I laid out everything I felt. Her eyes glistened. "I already saw it. I was in the audience, remember?" "Yes, but now you're up here, where I was, where I poured my pain out." She lowered her gaze. I deserved it, every bit of it. I looked at her, this woman I once adored, who now felt like a stranger. "It wasn't just about punishing you," I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. "It was also about setting myself free, turning my pain into something tangible, a performance I could walk away from." She sniffed, tears rolling down her cheeks. "And did it work? Are you free now?" I shook my head slowly, letting out a ragged sigh. "Not yet, but I'm closer." A thick silence blanketed us. She took a step nearer, searching my face. "Tom, I can't take back what I did. But if there's any chance, if you can find a way to let me earn back a piece of your trust." "That trust is gone," I interrupted, my voice echoing. "I told you that on stage in front of everyone, in the lines I wrote. It was real." She swallowed, tears dripping from her chin. "Then what do we do?" For a moment, I considered the possibilities. Counseling, living separately, or maybe forging an uneasy alliance for the child's sake. None of them felt right. None of them eased the raw ache in my chest. "I'm leaving," I said, voice quivering. "At least for a while. I can't stay in that house, pretending." She shut her eyes, nodding slowly, tears shimmering. "And our son?" I hesitated. "He's not mine, but I can't walk away from him overnight. I'll figure something out. But you and I." She let out a sob, shoulders shaking. I reached out, almost instinctively, to steady her. For a second, she clung to my hand, her fingers trembling. Then I pulled away, gentler than before, but firm. I stepped back, scanning the dark seats of the theater. "You should go," I said quietly. "I need time to breathe." She looked like she wanted to say more, but no words came. Finally, she nodded, stepping off the stage and disappearing into the darkness of the aisle. I left Sacramento. I handed most of my accounts over to a colleague, gave some story about needing an extended leave. I found a place across the country, Boston, ironically. I told myself the colder climate might match the chill in my heart. I spent the winter there, renting a modest apartment, living on savings. The nights were long and biting. The gray Atlantic skies a constant reminder that a new life can begin anywhere, even in the bleakest places. Melissa called sometimes. I rarely answered. When I did, it was short, mechanical. She emailed me updates about the child, school reports, pictures of him playing soccer. A few times, I felt tears sting my eyes. Seeing him smiling, that carefree grin that made me wish I could step back into fatherhood. But I couldn't. At least not yet. Spring arrived with the promise of renewal. I'd been in Boston for nearly 6 months. My hair had more gray in it now, my face leaner. I walked the harbor at dawn, letting the chill sea breeze whip around me. In those quiet moments, I reflected on the strange path my life had taken. One morning, as I sipped coffee at a tiny cafe, an elderly man struck up conversation. He noticed my accent, asked where I was from, what brought me to Boston. I gave a vague answer about needing a change of scenery. He nodded knowingly. "Ah, heartbreak, is it?" I offered a thin smile. "Something like that." He lifted his newspaper, tapping the headline about a local theater production. "You should see it," he said. Sometimes a good drama helps us see our own troubles more clearly. I thanked him politely, but I couldn't help the bitter twist in my chest. A theater production is exactly what had driven me away. Or, to be precise, it was my own production that had let me vent my pain. That afternoon, I walked along the Charles River, pondering the irony. Maybe returning to the stage, figuratively or literally, was the next step in processing all this. Yet, when I thought of the memories attached to 4 miles to the finish, I felt ill. Late that night, I found myself drafting a letter. Not to my wife, or to the child, but to myself. A letter about acceptance, about the final stage of grief. Letting go of illusions. I wrote pages of notes, confessions, regrets, hopes, all the messy truths I'd been avoiding. Somewhere in those pages, I wrote, "I still love her, but the love is changed, hollowed out." Maybe that's okay. We're all just fragile, flawed people, carrying wounds. I put the letter aside. The next morning, I received an unexpected phone call. From my wife. I debated ignoring it, but something compelled me to pick up. Her voice was subdued, shaky. "Tom, it's about our boy. He's been asking for you constantly. He thinks you hate him. He's acting out at school." My heart twisted painfully. I never wanted him to feel that. "I know," she said, and I could hear tears in her voice again. "We both messed up, but he shouldn't suffer for our mistakes. Can you come see him?" I inhaled slowly, gazing at the Boston skyline through my window. "Yes," I said. "I'll fly in next week." I returned to Sacramento in late April. The air felt different, warmer, friendlier. The blossoms on the trees made the streets smell sweet, a stark contrast to the bitterness I'd left behind. I rented a car, drove straight to the house that used to be my home. She opened the door. We stood awkwardly, memories crashing between us. Then she stepped aside, allowing me in. The child bounded down the stairs, skidding to a stop at the sight of me. His eyes lit up, but he hesitated, uncertain. "Hey, bud," I managed, my voice tight. He threw himself at me, wrapping his arms around my waist, tears in his eyes. I patted his back, feeling the swirl of fatherly love, guilt, confusion. We spent the weekend together, just him and me. I took him to the park, watched him kick a soccer ball, listened to his stories about school. He told me he'd started practicing for a small track event, ironically. My chest clenched at that parallel to the man who was his biological father, but I forced myself to smile. "You'll do great," I told him, forcing sincerity into my voice. At the end of the day, he stared at me with those earnest eyes. "Are you leaving again?" I couldn't lie. "Yes," I said gently, "but I'll come back." He sniffed, tears threatening. "Promise?" I nodded. "I promise." Melissa approached me that evening while the child slept. We stood in the hallway, the overhead light casting shadows on the walls. She looked exhausted, as if the months had weighed on her too. "Thank you for seeing him," she whispered. "It means a lot." I stared at her, searching for resentment or anger. It was still there, but dulled by time. He didn't do anything wrong. He shouldn't be punished. She nodded. I know. We fell silent. Then she asked, and us? I closed my eyes, my shoulders tensing. I can't make promises. Too much has happened. She stood there, trembling slightly. I'll wait, if you want me to. I still love you, Tom. I opened my mouth to respond, but words failed me. Instead, I turned away, heading outside to the car. Life became a series of trips back and forth. I'd spend a few weeks in Boston, then come to Sacramento for a weekend. I saw the child, made sure he was adjusting. We grew closer again, forging a bond that confused me. Biology said he wasn't mine, but my heart argued otherwise. I found out the runner had left town, some rumor about a better training facility in Oregon. Melissa said she didn't care, that it was over with him, that she'd realized her mistake. I listened, but I didn't commit to any path, letting the days drift by. Then came the day I stumbled upon an old family photo album in my Boston apartment. I was packing some boxes, considering a potential permanent move. Flipping through the pages, I saw pictures of me and Melissa in our early years. Her bright smile, my proud grin. The two of us standing by the California coast. Then pictures of the baby, chubby cheeks, wide eyes. I remembered how thrilled I was to be a father, how I'd spent hours rocking him to sleep. Those memories stabbed at me. They were real, genuine moments of love, even if the foundation was built on a lie. I caught my reflection in the window, gray streaks in my hair, lines around my eyes. Life had battered me, but I wasn't broken. I realized, in that instant, that my hatred and bitterness were starting to fade, replaced by a cautious acceptance. I flew to Sacramento one last time, uncertain of what I'd decide. The child was thrilled to see me. He tugged me around the house, showing me new drawings he'd made. One was of a family, a tall figure, a shorter one, and him in the middle, all smiling. His art style was simple, but the label said, Mom, Dad, and me. I stared at that picture, swallowing the lump in my throat. I was about to say something when Melissa stepped in, quietly observing us. She whispered, He still thinks of you as Dad. That never changed. I nodded, blinking back tears. I know. We put him to bed, reading him a story together for the first time in a long while. When he dozed off, we tiptoed out. Melissa walked me to the living room, her eyes searching mine. I sat on the sofa, exhaustion mingling with a tentative sense of peace. She hesitated, then sat beside me, not too close. I don't know if you'll ever be able to forgive me, she said, voice trembling. But I want you to know I'll do whatever it takes to make things right for him. For you, if you ever decide. I studied her face. It was etched with remorse, but also hope. I took a deep breath, remembering the words I'd spoken on stage, the vow of vengeance, the final line about being colder than revenge and stronger than her lies. Maybe that was still true, or maybe I was learning that even coldness can thaw. I spoke slowly, each word painstaking. I can't promise a happy ending, but maybe we can figure out a way to be in each other's lives without tearing each other apart. She sniffed, tears flooding her eyes. I'd like that. We sat there in silence for what felt like a lifetime. No big declarations, no sudden reconciliations. Just two people acknowledging the damage done, the child caught in between, and the uncertain path ahead. And in that silence, I felt a subtle shift, as if the final curtain of our old life had fallen, and a new scene was poised to begin. Now, months later, I stand at the threshold of another stage in my life. I've returned to Sacramento with a plan. I'm renting a small apartment in the city, separate from Melissa, but close enough to be there for the boy. We agreed to keep lines of communication open, at least for his sake. Do I still love her? Perhaps in some strange, wounded way. But the naive, wholehearted devotion is gone. I might remain half in, half out of her life. My trust in her is still broken, possibly beyond repair. Yet I'm no longer fueled by the blackness of hate. Sometimes, in the quiet of my new apartment, I think back to that play I staged. 4 miles to the finish. I recall the raw power in my voice, the hush of the crowd, the look on her face when she realized it was our story. I replay the final lines. I'm colder than vengeance, and stronger than your lies. And maybe that's who I am now. A man who's learned that cold is indeed an emotion, that emptiness can be a foundation upon which we rebuild. I feel the sting of betrayal, but it's eased by a guarded acceptance. Every so often, I'll see that runner's name in the sports pages. He's competing here or there, not making big waves, but still running. I feel nothing when I read about him. No anger, no jealousy, just a faint memory of the smell of mandarin and bitterness. As for the boy, he's growing fast. He still calls me Dad. I can't bring myself to correct him. He's become the only bright spot in this mess, a reason to keep trying, to keep from drowning in bitterness. I bring him to soccer practice, cheer him on, even take him for ice cream afterward. He has no clue about genetics or betrayal. He just knows that I'm there, sharing his life. Melissa and I speak more now, though carefully. We're polite, almost civil, like neighbors who share a complicated boundary line. Sometimes I catch her gazing at me with sorrow, wanting to say something, but I'm not ready to hear it. Maybe one day I'll truly listen. Maybe not. Even so, there's a faint sense of, not peace, exactly, but acceptance. The old me, the hopeless romantic who believed in perfect endings, is gone. In his place stands a man who survived betrayal, staged a public condemnation, and lived to tell the tale. So here I am, finishing this reflection. I speak these words as if in confession, still half disbelieving that it happened to me. Yet it did. My life, a facade for so long, shattered by a hidden perfume bottle, a DNA test, and the stifled moans in a room I'd once considered sacred. I've learned something along the way. Coldness and emptiness, for all their bleakness, can keep you alive when love fails. I'm not sure if that's a victory or a tragedy, but it's the truth. And now, with these final words, I close the curtain on this chapter. Perhaps another awaits. But tonight, as I look out my window at the quiet Sacramento streets, I realize I can stand here, alone, and breathe without rage. I can nod at the memory of that heartbreak and say to myself, I survived. And that for now is enough.